Hi, everybody. This is Mike Balzano, publisher of R&R and the Experience Events. Welcome to Trade Talks, Unlocking the Experience. Today, this is episode 13, lucky 13. We have a guest today who's no stranger to the experience. He's been a leader at this event in our industry for a long time. He's a husband, he's a father, a leader, he's a marketer, a cleaning expert, a salesman, a spokesman, an avid photographer, a bear and wildlife aficionado. We'll talk about that in a little bit for sure.
Okay.
He is a proud Colorado Buffalo. He is a veteran of the experience. And he's the vice president of marketing of HydraMaster. Of course, it's Mr. Doyle Bloss. Welcome, Doyle.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that introduction. I looked at some of the previous people that you guys signed up for this series of podcasts, and it's fun because they're a lot of fun people. But I also feel honored just to be mentioned in the same sentence as some of these folks, because they've all given a lot for the industry and to help build a unique experience as it goes, a unique opportunity for the entire industry to come together at an event. And it's exciting to be a part of that, because there was a time when the industry couldn't get together nationally. It just wasn't possible. There were too many organizations in too many places. So we'll talk more about that later. Yes, I am a proud Colorado Buffalo.
Yes, indeed.
And for those of you who don't like Coach Prime, I just have this to tell you. I indoctrinated both my sons into the Colorado Buffaloes. Neither one of them ended up going to school there, but they both live and bleed the Colorado Buffaloes like I do. And they're both in their 20s, and they've never seen anything. We've been lousy their entire lives. So we're hopeful Coach Prime gets us where we want to go. So we're excited about that. And yeah, I am a Colorado native, went to school at the University of Colorado, and my heart's in Colorado. But if you haven't looked there lately, the prices are in Colorado are about equal to the West Coast. So it's not a cheap place to live anymore.
No, that's a lot. And actually, that first answer was wonderful, Doyle, because I was going to say, thank you for saying the nice things about this podcast. The real secret is, yeah, they're great people I've been having on, but this is my first time doing this. So I'm looking at my favorite personalities in the industry, so I could just sit here and smile and let you do all the work. And it's working so far.
Good.
So, we almost moved to Colorado. Actually, we're down in Naples, Florida now. About 10 years ago, we realized we didn't have to sit through the crappy Ohio winters anymore. And because the snow there is different, you know it. You get a foot of snow in an hour, and then it's sunny for 3 days, and it's just beautiful. We have another event we run there. I go every year. I'm really flattered. I just love being there with the clear air.
Yeah, and people make fun. People keep asking me, why did you move to a little town in Kansas? And last week I was back in Everett at HydraMaster with our sales team and our production team, and we were having a bunch of meetings. And it took me about 10 minutes in a rental car on I-5 to remember why I like living in a small town in Kansas. So
Yeah.
the lack of we have one red light in our town, and it starts flashing yellow at 6 p.m. every night. So that's the kind of traffic I have to put up with.
That's nice. That's I'm very jealous, actually. That is nice, especially as we're not 25 anymore and we roll along. It's
exactly
calm us down.
Yeah,
now as most people know, or for the two people who don't know, you've been in the industry forever, and actually your family has been in the industry forever. Tell me a little bit about how Ralph got started. Your dad and he's founded Steamway at age 60. Is that correct?
Well, he bought Steamway at age 60. He actually worked for the company for years before that. We lived in Illinois, and that's why I still root for the Cubbies. But we moved from Illinois back to Colorado. We couldn't wait to get back to Colorado, and he went to work for a gentleman named Clark Seedloom, who had started. Clark was one of the original pioneers in the industry. And when I throw out some of these names, the people under 40 are going to roll their eyes and go, "Who's that?" But I have written a lot of history stuff about the industry, because I do think we owe a lot to those original pioneers in the industry that started companies. And I'll tell you a little story about that, because I actually started. My dad went to work for Steamway, so when I was a teenager, I got an old Steamway portable. Those of you who've been around a long time remember the old Steamway 400. Portable is kind of an oxymoron. They weighed 168 pounds, but I was 15 years old, and a friend of mine and I decided we were going to start cleaning carpets. And my mother drove us to our first jobs in a cherry red 1972 Ford station wagon.
Yep.
But we discovered real quick that there was a lot more money in cleaning carpets than there was in flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever else teenagers did in those days. So we started a carpet cleaning business, and I've heard a lot of the great stories about how people originally got in the industry, but one of the ones that I like to tell is I've been cleaning carpets for about a year, and we got a job to clean my dentist's office, and it was a 3-story building. So my friend and I that were running a carpet cleaning business, we figured if we could clean the carpets in a 3-story building, we could probably retire after that. I mean, this job, the numbers were so big, and it's probably a $2,000 job, but we thought this was it. And uh so we started cleaning the carpet. Of course, it's in the middle of the night when they're closed, and about 2 hours after we started, we were so proud of the route, the how fast we were going and how clean, how good the carpet looked. But we looked back over the carpet, and there weren't ripples in the carpet. There were waves. And I'm talking about knee-high waves in the
Right.
carpet. And back then, there wasn't ICRC schools. There certainly wasn't the internet. There wasn't people you could call to learn, what's happening and what should you do. The only person that I knew that I could call for help was my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had a reputation of being this very kind soul. I have to tell you, he wasn't very kind that night, because I couldn't get him to quit laughing, because I really thought my life was over. I envisioned that I was going to be indebted to the owner of this building for the rest of my life, trying to buy them new carpet. And finally, in between my dad's chuckles, he finally spit out, "Let it dry, it'll go back down." And he was right. Of course it did, and it looked good. And nobody but my friend and I that were cleaning it ever even knew that happened. But for a while, I really did think my life was open. And I know a lot of
Yeah.
my friends that were back in the industry in the 70s cleaning carpets can relate to that story, because there was just a lot of stuff going on then in terms of the backings and the types of carpet fibers, and just a general lack of knowledge. You know, the a lot of it was trial and error. That's kind of what you did sometimes, is you tried it and hoped that it went well. So we enjoyed that, but I ended up going off to college. I was going to be a CPA. That was my big goal, and so I went to the University of Colorado. But right when I graduated, my dad finally had the opportunity to buy Steamway from the original owner, and he was 60 years old at the time. So the bank asked him, you know how banks are, even to this day. They were polite about it, but they kind of said, you're getting up there in years, and uh, you could kick off at any time. So could you get somebody to co-sign this loan? So he said, well, my son just recently graduated from the University of Colorado. He's going to be a CPA. And they said, okay, we'll take him. So I ended up co-signing the loan with my dad to buy the company. And I went back off to college because I was going to get a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad would call me about every 2 weeks and say, son, I love you, and I'm glad you're out there having fun. At this time, I was only 3. And he said, but I'm old and senile, and your name's on this loan too. I sure would appreciate it if you'd come back here and help me run this place. And by that time, my little brother had gotten involved, and my mom had gotten involved. So it had already become a family business. And so I thought about it, and I said, Dad, I really like it here. And he said, okay. So he would make that call about every month. And I'm old and senile. And that's funny, because he was 60 years old at the time, and he worked every day he was alive until he passed away at the age of 79 at Steamway. So it wasn't like he was on the edge of losing it. He enjoyed this industry in a way that I don't think a lot of people can understand back then. And and the things that he loved about the industry, I tell people that's the things I love. There's no other industry that I know of. I'm sure there are, but I don't know about it, where a husband and wife can decide to start a cleaning business and basically pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, not have a lot of money. And 5 years later, they're not only making a good living for themselves, they've got 2 or 3 employees that they're making a good living for. That's why I love this business. In spite of ourselves, we can be successful at it. And the 70s and 80s proved that, because there was nobody teaching anything back then. But early on, when I finally acquiesced and went to work for my dad. And, the first thing he did was sit me down at a class taught by Matt Clark, who was a business operator. And he taught business management, and the Stop franchise is eventually where he ended up. And I met people like Ron Toney and Jeff Bishop and so many of the early pioneers of education in our industry. And that's caught my attention. I mean, I loved working with those guys. And so from day one in the industry, I was really involved in the educational side. And that was a big part of what Steamway did back in the day. And so it wasn't just making equipment and talking to people about truck mounts. That's another thing that I enjoy about the industry, is that everything kind of stays in the same pattern. Back then, the big argument was about portables versus truck mounts. Do you really need a truck mounts? Now we talk about low moisture versus truck mounts. And obviously there's a place for everything. There is. But there's nothing like a fire breathing truck mount. There's just nothing. And people who try and explain them away just don't understand the science of cleaning. So obviously I've spent my entire life involved in the supply side of the business. In 2003, after we had sold the business, when you buy this, Mike, when you buy a family business, it's very difficult to make your own way. And one of the things that I decided to do was, my brother had left for Hawaii to become a realtor. We don't even talk about him anymore. He's the black sheep in the family living in Hawaii. So seriously, he's doing great over there.
I'll bet.
Yeah, it's a tough life, but somebody's got to live there. But I just decided that it was after my father passed away, and the new owner really needed to make his mark on the company. And I decided, I was presented with an opportunity by the Hanks brothers to go out to work at what was known at the time as HydraMaster or Bridgepoint. Today we know it as a Ramsco. Or in Salt Lake City. And it was a big change. I mean, I'd been in a family business for 20 years. And at the time I left Steamway, I was the president of the company, and I went to work for them out there, and absolutely loved what they were doing with that company. They were also involved deeply in education and training. And the idea that they were building this network of distributors across the United States that could get supplies into the hands of cleaning and restoration professionals. I still laugh when I read on some of the forums about people complaining, well, my nearest distributor is 3 hours away. And well, there was a time when your nearest distributor was like 5 states away. So
you moved to Montana. Good luck with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Montana's, and yeah, we used to give a hard time to our distributor in Montana because he was selling so many truck mounts. We were convinced that he must be getting elk and bighorn sheep to go into the cleaning business. So then I spent about 10 years there, and was presented with an opportunity to go to work with HydraMaster. I'd always admired HydraMaster. When I was working at Steamway, they were a direct competitor, but Mike Palmer and Steve Brandt and the guys who built HydraMaster were friends of mine. And I, working at Bridgepoint, we were a big vendor. We were a big distributor for them, a big customer of theirs. So I went to work for HydraMaster and have been there ever since, through a lot of different changes and ownerships and general managers. But one thing that's stayed true is the value of the cleaning equipment that the company manufactures. And it's been a fun ride. But like, people ask me all the time, have you ever thought about leaving the industry? And sure, I mean, I've been presented with opportunities to leave the industry and go into training or public speaking and things like that. But I just love the fact that our business still represents such a great opportunity for people to grow a business and make something that is bigger than they ever imagined they could have. And that's, I think, one of the great joys about the Experience Convention, is the ability of everyone to come together and celebrate what is a fantastic industry. So that's kind of like quick history of what Doyle's been up to. And you know, I'm on the tail end. Barry Costa and I were standing at the Experience Convention a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I always loved that Larry did was recognizing people from the industry who passed away. And he kind of had an in memoriam thing with pictures and a little bit about their story. And obviously, you know, 100 words don't do the justice to the life of anyone, much less some of the pioneers in our industry. But I looked at Barry and I said, you know, the problem, these people on the in memoriam board now are not our mentors.
Yeah.
They're our peers. So that's, I think, when I first recognized, and you know, that's one of the things before I ever retire, I'm hopeful that younger leadership steps up, and I think some of them have. You know, Lisa Wagner may not consider herself to be younger than me, but she is, and she's a big part of what the Experience Convention does, and Mark Kennedy and some of those folks. And I think, you know, the leadership is evolving that will take this industry into the next century. And if you look at the amount of change that's happened just in my 40-year career, imagine what this industry is going to look like in 2060, 2070, and what it might be doing. And so it's exciting to see that. You mentioned photography. Yes. I do, when I'm not working in the carpet cleaning business or in the restoration business, I do love to do wildlife photography. I try to go to Yellowstone or Grand Teton or Rocky Mountain National Park at least once a year. I love to photograph grizzly bears. I guess the best story I can tell about that, and was the first time that I was ever within range of the grizzly bear. It was about 75 yards away from us, and you're supposed to be 100 yards.
Right.
And but I had my two sons with me, and my youngest son, Josh, was about 6 or 7 at the time. And I looked at him, I said, so Josh, are you scared of this bear? And he said, no, Dad, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
That's right.
So
that's right.
He quickly understood what we were doing, but to see wildlife in their natural habitat and photograph them, there's just nothing that I enjoy more. It's a grand opportunity, and obviously it's changed a lot. You know, people ask me about it that are going to Yellowstone or going to Grand Teton. 30 years ago, to see a grizzly bear, it was a rare thing. You know, you were lucky enough to see one. Now it's fairly common. The grizzly bear population is growing. Any of our friends up in Montana can tell you that, because it's expanding into neighborhoods and places where they traditionally were but haven't been in 150 years. But it's just, you know, bighorn sheep, elk, deer, if they've got antlers or horns, I like to take pictures of them. And so I spend as much time as I can doing that, and it's just for fun. My nephew is a professional photographer, and he went on several trips to Yellowstone with me. And my brother asked me to take him out there because I asked him, he knew what all this camera gear was. And we were standing in a fox den where there was a fox with 4 brand new kits that had just been born. And I asked him to add up the amount of money that was in the photography equipment. And he said about $700,000 is what he came up with, was standing there by us. And I said, just remember that photography is a great thing to go into, but it's a very competitive business. So he's actually ended up being a very successful photographer, but you know, he lives in Kauai, so he's got plenty of opportunities to take pictures of beautiful things. So that's what I like to do when I'm not doing things. I'm involved in church activities. I love to do that. My faith's a big part of my life and always has been. So I enjoy this industry and I enjoy the experience. So let's talk more about that.
Well, I want to go real quick because you said some great things. I want to ask you some quick questions about first. It's the 13th one we've done. Everybody, we drift into why did you get into the 2 answers. Well, number 1, we want to help people, which is true. And what you said is that it's an easy way to start the American dream. You know, it's an easy way to start a business and get started. And I think both of those whys are wonderful and make you more excited to get involved in this, in my opinion. Because everybody has the same thoughts. You know,
Oh, yeah,
we're helping
absolutely.
people out at their darkest hour and we can start a business. And anyway, also you
Well, when you're in business for yourself and a challenge comes up,
right,
sometimes you honestly think I must be the only person this has ever happened to.
right.
And there are some bizarre things that happen. But you know what? Over the years, I've learned if it happened to you, it's probably happened to somebody else, and somebody out there, maybe through trial and error, maybe through the education they got, they figured out a way to fix it. And
And yeah,
just
and as you mentioned before, I mean, we have some, I've been on my soapbox all year about getting our great leaders to mentor the next generation coming up. And I always have to explain that I have an AARP card too. I'm not saying go away. I'm saying you're the stars of this industry, begging you to help these kids like find the way because they're excited to come in. And I think that's great. Do you think your dad saw something in you? I mean, I know he tried to kind of trick you into signing that loan, as dads do. But do you think
uh,
he saw something with this way to get you? Because now, you know what? I'm happy he's gonna be an accountant, but I know he could be great at this. Or am I just
yeah, I do. I think he thought I was way too dynamic of a person and liked things, like people too much to be a CPA.
right?
If you think about it, and obviously there's lots of wonderful people who are CPAs, but it's a desk job. It's behind the scenes. It's back in that corner counting numbers and doing things. And I have a friend who went on to be a very successful partner at KPMG and has a wonderful wife and daughter um, and is super successful. That he and I grew up together. We both went to school together to be CPAs. But yeah, I do. I think my dad thought, he's a people person like I am, and he needs to be out with people. I don't have any doubt about
You and your dad were huge and are huge parts of the experience events. And by the way, it's a good time to mention the next event is coming up April 3rd to the 5th in Chattanooga at the Chattanooga Convention Center. You
it. That's
can
right.
get
And everybody has to sing "Pardon Me, Roy." Is that the Chattanooga Choo Choo? When you get
Chattanooga choo choos are involved, and Sean Bission is already working on he's a train guy, as you know. He's working on some choo choo
Yes.
based
And
fun.
and listen, let me tell you a couple things about
Yeah.
Chattanooga. Number one, the train itself, where they have the Chattanooga Choo Choo, is an awesome place. It's fun, and people don't understand Chattanooga is a great place to go. I've traveled the whole world, and I think the best aquarium I've ever been to is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So if you love sea wildlife, they have just an awesome aquarium.
Perfect. What now? One of the things we know by our friends at Clean Facts event originally started the Ralph Bloss Award, the humanitarian award. What what was the origin of that? I mean, obviously it's because he was such a legend in the industry.
Well,
But
I'll tell you, it was the brainchild of a gentleman named Evan Kessler, who
yep,
was the publisher at the time of ICS magazine, which was a BNP meeting
and
publisher.
R&R. So he was
Yep,
our
yeah,
original creator of this
he was
magazine.
the editor of at the time,
Right.
and he's still very good friends with our family, and as a matter of fact, just recently announced he's retiring because of some health issues. And Evan was another pioneer in our industry, and his original boss, Howard Olansky. I've talked about both of them in my history blog that I have. But Evan went to my dad's funeral, and everybody that was from the industry knew about my dad's contributions inside the industry. But I think the thing that struck him is that there were 18 pastors at my dad's funeral, head pastors of churches.
Wow.
And one of the things that my dad did in his life was pastor to pastors. And what I mean by that, if you think about it, if the preacher of your church or your synagogue or whatever faith you might be, if the bishop, if you're or whoever it might be that is assigned to, tender to the flock, who tenders to them? Because they're just people. And that was one of the things that my dad loved to do, was to encourage and counsel pastors. And then the other thing that I think struck Evan at the time was all the different charitable events and things that my dad was involved in that he knew nothing about. He felt like I thought I knew this guy. And the church camp that I went to when I was a kid in Colorado had just named a cabin. and because of all his contributions to that church camp. And what it really came down to is that my dad got involved anywhere, anything. He got involved and he did something about it. And so that kind of birthed the idea that there was a lot of people in our industry that do humanitarian efforts. Some of them are well known, some of them you've never heard of. Some of their humanitarian efforts are well known, and some you don't know anything about until somebody tells you about them. You know, one of the definitions of humanitarian is somebody who does something without recognition. And there's literally thousands of people in our industry who mentor and serve their communities in a way that most of us never know about. You know, I read about a carpet cleaner in the United Kingdom who 2 weeks ago went to a job site where he was cleaning for a 93-year-old woman that was dying of leukemia.
Mhm.
And he just said at the end of the job, he couldn't possibly bring himself to charge that way. And that's the kind of industry, right? People who care. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what birthed that award is that it recognizes people. Sometimes you've heard of them and sometimes you have no idea who they are. And you know, last year's winner, Jorge, is just, he's one of the best human beings you could ever meet. And I didn't know Jorge, so he won
Mhm.
the award. A lot of my friends knew him, but I didn't know him. And after meeting him, I'm like, wow, this is one impressive individual. And that's what's been the funnest thing about the award is the people who vote on it, the people who vote on the winners. It's not political. It's not out to recognize the biggest supplier, although some of the biggest people from the biggest suppliers have won. It's voted on by the past winners.
Right.
So it's like, and now we're up, you know, 20 something winners. So it's always an impassioned thing. They take this, the men and women on that committee take that award so seriously. You can't imagine how serious they are about it. And they take it very, and every year the vote is close because we always get 2 or 3 candidates that just stand out. And it's always very close. It's not like, you know, that one person runs away with it. There's always 2 or 3 very, very worthy recipients. And there's literally 50 or 60 people that have been nominated over the years that have never won it. And
Mhm.
their nomination gets voted and they may never win it, but they're just superhuman beings. They're just the things they do for their community and the industry itself, but mainly their community on this award are just outstanding. So I really appreciate BNP Media and the experience, you know, Larry and Clean Fats carried it on, and I'm very appreciative of it because there's plenty of awards that recognize people who achieve things in our industry inside the industry. But sometimes we need to step back and go, you know, there is life outside of cleaning and restoration,
Yeah.
and recognize people who are just doggone good people. That's what it comes down to.
You know, just again, doing these 12 little interviews, I've learned everybody's got such a great, you peel the onion back. They're good people. Like what you just explained, Lisa Lavender owned an Arena Football League team. Lisa Kennedy wanted to go to school to study Russian studies when the USSR crumbled. It's like all these interesting things. And I'd imagine it's not just the 12 people I talked to, it's an industry-wide phenomenon. The Ralph Bloss Humanitarian Award is such a big deal at our event every year, and I'm so glad that we're still doing it. And what was the first time you went to the experience? Do
Well,
you
that's a
remember?
great question, Mike. The truth is that if you go back in time, before the connections and then what became the Experience Convention, there were 13 different trade associations, regional trade associations around the country that held their own events. And I feel fortunate that when I was traveling young in my career, I did get to go to a lot of those events because I've met people at MSPCA and NEIRC and SCRT and CFI and CCI&W and PRCA, and I could go on with the alphabet soup, but the people that I met, just tremendous people. But the truth is that their events were local. And at the time, you know, every manufacturer there weren't a lot, the restoration industry wasn't nearly as developed then as it is now. Now if you have a restoration event, you've got consultants, you've got software, you've got all kinds of detection equipment, computer, you name it that has an interest in our industry. Back then it was people who made air movers and dehumidifiers and people who made truck mounts and portables and chemicals. And that's really all there was. And so you'd go to these regional events and, there might be 150 people there. I always tell my favorite story is my dad went to a trade show in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, if I'm going to plan a trade show, Tulsa, Oklahoma is destination that I would think of. But actually, I'm kidding it. But I love Tulsa. I live near Tulsa.
Right, I understood.
Yeah, I don't want to insult all my friends in Tulsa, but I think they would admit that nobody goes to Tulsa on vacation. But there were 54 exhibitors, and the attendance was 27. 27 people came to the show. But my dad, the ever optimistic, I said, so how do you? Oh, it's great, it's fantastic. We made lots of good connections. That was my father. There was never an event where we didn't meet somebody who was going to be an integral part of the future of our company, and that was his optimism. That was always the way he looked at it. But as you can tell, those events were expensive for the vendors. They weren't well attended. Generally, you were talking to people who, you and I talked about this, Mike. Who do I want to meet at a trade show? I want to see all my friends. I want to see all my customers. But to make it financially beneficial, I need to meet some people I've never met before, who are newer to the industry and they haven't been in it 25 years and they've been using this brand of truck mount since the beginning and they're happy with it. I need to meet some new people. And so all you met were the same friends. But the bigger part of it was that because there were so many small regional events, there was never an opportunity for the industry to get together as one group. And so all the trade associations came together and Larry Cooper birthed the idea of, at the time it was called Connections. And it started, I remember I've been to every single experience event except one since its inception. And it started out, it wasn't a great success at the beginning, but it wasn't a flop either. It went really well because the industry was clamoring for a national event. And obviously, over the years, it became immediately obvious that in spite of what some of us think of Las Vegas, that is the place to go. That's where people go.
But I feel exactly the same way, by the way. Go ahead.
I like to tell the story. The first time my wife went there with me, driving out of town, and she kept turning around as we were driving away from Las Vegas. And I said, honey, what are you doing? She says, I'm looking for the pillar of salt shaped as Las Vegas. Some of you will get that joke, and some of you have no idea what that means. But anyway, that's Las Vegas. But it's obviously a destination. There's so much to do there. But also that there have been many other successful East Coast events. You and I were talking about Clearwater Beach and what a great place that was. And that outgrew the facility that the event was in. I think everybody gets, why'd they ever move it from there? Because it couldn't hold it anymore.
We got too big.
It got big. So the first events, were fairly successful, but as you know, this industry is full of organizations, and I don't mean this to sound bad. It's not. They have an agenda that has to do with them, and so there were some groups that never did join the experience. Some trade associations, some franchises, obviously, that never joined the experience, but it became the go-to national event, and it really did. And I know that, every year, and especially Mike, now that you're the person running the show, you're going to hear from people who are disappointed in this and disappointed in that. And it's nothing but, you'll hear complaints. But let me tell you, if you haven't been around a while, you don't have the ability to learn from history. And the industry needs a single go-to national event that everyone is welcome. Doesn't mean that they need to stop their event, but there's certainly nothing wrong with coming to this event. And it needs that. And as over the last few years, as you know, that the restoration industry has taken on a life of its own, and there's a lot of events because of the importance of restoration, first response, and things like that. As some of these bigger hurricanes hit, and literally people lost their lives in their homes and all that. You know, the government got involved in everything else. But I encourage people. The experience event is the industry event. It's the go-to industry event where everyone is welcome. Anybody can attend, anybody can exhibit. Unfortunately, Mike, you even let my competitors in. I don't know why, but you do. And it's a place that you can be at. And you know, the truth is some of the manufacturers have backed away from the trade. And you and I know why. It's very expensive. It's very expensive to put on a trade show. If people had any idea how much you had to pay for that room a day.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah, and if they knew that, you know, what dryage costs and all the things that the exhibitors have to pay to get in there. But in the end, it's worth it. It's worth it because it's the industry coming together. And the truth is, you need the exhibitors. You need the new equipment or the new software or the new, you know, consultant or whatever it is. You need those because that's what attracts people to come. But the biggest part of the event is sitting there talking to each other in the 10 minutes before the speech starts. And I don't think people understand how fun it is to be amongst peers who are there to help you grow. And that's, you know, I'm here to learn. Here's what I've tried. It worked. This worked. This didn't. That's the best part of the experience is the ability to learn from your peers. And the truth is, over the years with the trade shows, I think people miss because carpet cleaning can be so competitive. People think that everybody's like that. Some of my best friends work for competitors. I enjoy getting to see them and catch up with them to find out how their families do it and all that. You know, the exhibitors in this, and it hasn't always been this way, but the exhibitors in this industry are friends with each other, and they enjoy getting together. And the truth is, we'd rather talk to end users, but if we get a chance to talk to each other, that's great too, and catch up. And so the experience is the go-to industry event, and it grew out of a need for the industry to have a single go-to place that anybody was welcome at. And it's a great opportunity to learn, a great opportunity to network. And the truth is, have some fun. I mean, if you like Vegas, you'll have fun in Vegas. If you don't like Vegas, you know, listen, if I can find things to do in Vegas, anybody can. Because I don't like 90% of Vegas, but there are things there that I had no idea how talented Donnie and Marie Osmond as an example. So there you go.
You're still going strong.
That's one of the best shows I've ever been to.
Well, I got to pull us in though. Before we go to Vegas, we got to go to Chattanooga, Tennessee.
That's right. So let's focus on Chattanooga because the East Coast event has always been smaller. Yeah. And depending on where it's been in Atlanta, it's been in Florida, it was in Cincinnati a couple of years back. Depending on where it's at, the audience kind of changes. And that's nothing wrong with that. That's actually can be a good thing because it's different people every year for you to meet. But the upcoming event in Chattanooga, you know, the lineup that you guys put together every year is just phenomenal. And I know that there's some people out there who bellyache about the influence that this organization or that company has on the event and this speaker and that speaker. But you know, some of the smartest people I know work for my competition. And they have things that they can teach you to help your business with. So the fact that they don't work for HydraMaster doesn't mean that they don't have value. It means that they do. There's a lot of value in what they have to say. So the people that are there, and you've been interviewed, you know, the Barry Costas and the Sean DeSales and Lisa Wagner's and Mark Kennedy's and on and Chuck Viola. You've got Chuck and I think we're the first two people in the industry who actually taught somebody, you know, how to do cost analysis. And he's made a business out of it, and it just does a tremendous job. and on and on and on. I can't name everybody, but the show that you put together in Chattanooga is one that people would be crazy if they didn't consider going, especially if they're in the eastern half of the United States and they're not Vegas fans. That, if there's a lot of people out there that aren't Vegas. If you're not a Vegas fan, then go to Chattanooga.
That's right.
Chattanooga's about as the opposite of Vegas as you can get. And we'll all go out and get grits and have a good time.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's
absolutely.
I've always said, Larry, he didn't name this the experience by chance. He wants everybody to have fun, have an experience, have a good time. But you're right. I mean, the hands-on is what brings a lot of attendees, and those attendees are the ones who are going to buy your products. And that's the whole point of it. One final thing I want to throw out there, you triggered something that I was thinking about in another podcast about what I learned during COVID. And I think, we can all agree on this. I dare to say, is that you gotta be with people. We were without
absolutely.
people for a couple of years, and bad stuff happened all over the place.
We're still suffering from the
case.
And
so
I agree.
Getting to expos and coming out and seeing your friends and your competitors. And I also said, it's funny you mentioned about your competitors. I mean, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are best friends now. That didn't mean they want to beat each other's brains in when they played. That's okay. It's American competition. That's okay. So this is great. By the way, Doyle and HydraMaster are going to be exhibiting in Chattanooga. And please make plans to join us and attend the experience April 3rd through the 5th. You can register through our website, rnrmagonline.com. You could find this in all R&R videos and podcasts on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Please follow us if you haven't already, and feel free to leave a quick review. And also, please follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. A very special thank you to our guest, the one and only Doyle Bloss. This is Trade Talks, Unlocking the Experience. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks, Doyle.